Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. Welcome to Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. This is a special dedicated series on transition finance. Why are we recording this series? Many farmers are ready to speed up their regenerative transition. They've looked for learning, done the courses, read the key books, hosted the gurus on their farms, explored farm-size regenerative designs, and most importantly, started their pilots and feedback loops. This is where transition finance is key. A local bank loan often isn't feasible because of the short duration, lack of flexibility, and the farmer's lack of collateral. Furthermore, there's a limit of how much equity a farmer is able or willing to give away. That is why my co-host, aspiring to be regenerative farmer Benedikt Bösel, and I are embarking on a journey to find out what are the key principles of transition finance for regenerative farmers. We are interviewing leading practitioners in the regenerative agriculture and food finance space. They share their insights how they would finance the speed up of the regenerative transition on Benedikt's 1,000 hectares, which is almost 2,500 acres, farm in Germany close to Berlin. This is an open process. We are sharing our lessons through the podcast episodes as we go along. We don't have the answers yet, just a lot of questions. So please share with us any examples of transition finance you've seen, other inspiration, people to interview, etc. Get in touch via the contact page on the website, investinginregenerativeagriculture.com. That is investinginregenerativeagriculture.com. So welcome to the podcast show, Benedikt. I'm so excited to have you as my co-host on this journey. We're going to start with many interesting episodes and learn, I think, a lot on transition finance. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Glad to be here. I think, we have so many things to discuss, and I'm really interested to see where the journey leads us.
And can you start with giving a small introduction? I mean, I know you, I feel pretty well, but obviously the audience doesn't. Who you are and what made you take over a gigantic farm, which we'll completely explore in the next episodes, in Germany. Who's Benedikt Bösel?
That's a good. If I would always know that, I think that would help me already quite a bit. So basically, I was born in Munich and lived there for the first couple of years of my life. But we always went to the countryside on the weekends, and pretty much all I remember is actually playing on my own. In the mud, in the forest, running around, being on my own, being free in the nature. Having two older sisters probably is part of that equation. But
you want to escape every now and then.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to, especially in that age. And growing up, it was quite similar. We moved to the middle of Germany in the Rhineland, where we also lived on the countryside. So for me, especially in the first couple of years, it was always about being outside, hunting, fishing, just being a boy in the open, so to say. So my connection to nature is really, from a very young age, I guess. And I was always fascinated by all different animals and species and all the complex systems and that real life you can experience when you're outside.
But you didn't turn into a farmer immediately. You didn't study biology or you went to farming school, but you turned into an investment banking career. That's quite a shift.
Yeah, exactly. It was actually quite the opposite. Although having grown up like that and totally focused on nature, when I was in the age of, let's say, 18, 19, 20, the idea of being a farmer was not that compelling to me. Quite the opposite. I was looking at the whole banking industry and investment banking. And I remember when we were like young kids starting to go out, we were always telling the girls, yeah, we are an investment banker and we study on the LSE in London and so forth. And I think, I kind of bought into that because obviously having that cool banking, a lot of money idea and career, that was, something I thought was, interesting in a way and could be a career. So that's really how I got into that. And I think at that time, I wasn't, let's say, I didn't reflect as much as you do when you get older, naturally. So when I started in investment banking, we pretty much had the top phase 2006. Then we had the financial crisis 2007. And that's really, when I started thinking about that whole process and idea and the kind of the value and the meaning that you can actually achieve in that industry. And I mean, seeing how this strong system of I don't know, that strong financial system suddenly basically collapses into its collapses. And to see.
So basically you started at the absolute height of the wave, basically, and then the absolute depth came, like the strongest financial crisis since the Great Depression basically followed immediately after.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, as a 22-year-old, your view on those kind of things are obviously quite different, and seeing that immediate reaction and then seeing your cool managing directors sitting in their offices and crying, and you knew, okay, they have like 2-3 different children, they have huge investment annuity costs that they have to cover, and suddenly, they all don't have any jobs anymore. That really started a certain, at least emotional process with me. And I mean, I think that was really the time where I kind of, after 2-3 years in investment banking, I started looking at, that's not your way. I mean, I was like thinking about how can I really find, what I'm supposed to do. And having grown up in nature, having had that strong connection all my life to, let's say, the natural world, I was thinking, okay, this is like an area where we will have increasingly more problems and fundamental problems. And having seen how that crisis hit the industry and what huge effect that had on livelihoods from people all over the world, I thought, as much as this is bad, you have to turn your talents and your focus onto something that is actually good. So that brought me back to, the question of, how can you contribute? How can you bring your talent to an area where it really matters? And naturally, let's say, nature and resources and those processes were my strongest focus, I guess.
And that led you to started focusing more on environmental technologies and ag tech. How did that happen? How did you roll into that? What were exciting moments you remember? I mean, still you're involved in ag tech, but very soil focused. But let's say before you took over the farm, what was your focus?
Well, I mean, basically, partly through my history, right? So I had all that, let's say, financial knowledge and experience from the university, then working in mergers and acquisitions with the bank. After that, having done some restructuring, I knew that, that is a kind of skill set and an instrument that could be quite beneficial. And I didn't want to move, too far away from that. So I was looking for some situation where I can bring that in, but also, move towards things where my passion lies. So that being, let's say, resources and land use. And so I was between those two, having the financial side on one hand and, that new kind of way and vision of getting active in the natural world, so to say. And then I was, screening basically on a worldwide scale, how can you combine the two? What can you derive from that? How can you develop that somehow? And obviously I looked towards the US, and that was a time where you had like the first couple of startups in the ag space, and you had VCs like Cultivian, Antera was already doing their first fund, Avrio was there also, but there was no ag funder. There was like the ag tech structure as we know today wasn't yet at all actually developed. But seeing that, like that idea of innovation, technological, digital innovation in the agriculture space, I immediately thought, okay, wow, I mean, this is it. This is exactly what we need. We can only solve those huge problems through innovation, and obviously technology and digitalization obviously bring a huge potential to that. So after I kind of, found that or understood that, understood that incredible potential, I wrote, let's say, a pitch, so to say, and started connecting and contacting and meeting all the large German agriculture companies, potential investors. I looked for startups in the space. I reached out to universities. I started talking to different politicians and basically went around saying, guys, look, there is something happening here. There is innovation being developed. There is incredible potential, and we need to be part of that. And going to a very traditional, often also family-run company focused on agriculture equipment and telling them about venture capital and investing into
must be an interesting experience. Yeah.
Ag tech innovation. I think those guys, they were always, checking underneath the table if I'm wearing shoes made of wood or something, because that was just not on the cards. They never heard of it. They never thought about that. Like even the pronunciation of startup is something that they took like three appointments to get going. So basically, I think that was like the first time that we, tried to develop those kind of ideas. But you could immediately see that if you come as a 25, 26-year-old, you want to raise a fund, invest in ag tech startups after the biotech bubble, having no track record, that's just not a very good selling point, right? I wouldn't give anyone money who would be in that position. So during that phase, I met someone who just raised or started a corporate venture capital fund with Bilfinger. And Bilfinger is also quite a traditional company in different manufacturing and engineering processes. And because of their capability in water and garbage and renewable energy technologies, they were already quite close to AgTech, let's say. So I started working with them, looking at the market in a similar way. But then they had some serious problems with regards to revenue forecasts, and the share price fell from 84 to 40 something, which I think was the first in German history to go down that badly. So obviously in those kind of situations, venture capital is one of the things.
The last thing.
Yeah, exactly. Having to lay off 4,000 people and then telling someone that you'll invest into a startup, I think it's also a difficult one. But that was a time for me that obviously I was very involved in the whole market of agriculture startups in Germany. I spoke to, many of the associations that have some connection to farming. I did various talks and speeches at political institutes and political, like for the government. And what I realized that, all of those technologies, all of the problems, all of the, let's say, underlying fundamentals, all of that, let's say, complexity was just overwhelming, right? So I really had that strong feeling that in order to develop the market, to develop that idea, to produce technologies, to help startups also and find solutions, you need people who are on the ground, and you need people who are on the ground and at the same time open and willing and able to speak to all different interest groups, right? You got to be able to talk to an ecological farmer and a conventional farmer. You got to be able to talk to people who are from the conservation side. You're going to talk to large corporates like Bayer, for example. You got to be able to talk to, or not only able but willing to, the politicians, because we can't solve those kind of problems on our own. No one can. It always has to be a sort of interdisciplinary, multifunctional group of actors and different actors coming together and saying, okay, let's do this, let's solve this thing.
And this thing for you, also, if I understand and remember correctly, slowly more and more and more, it started to click. Like this thing starts with soil. Like it starts and ends probably with soil. And was it a realization that you always had, or was it something that over these many talks you did, many conversations you had, many companies and startups you looked at, and also obviously many farms you visited, and you spend, I'm imagining, also time on the farm of your parents. That soil moment, was there a soil moment? Was it a soil process? How did that grow?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question. I guess there was two moments that kind of came together. There was a soil moment and there was a me, myself, and I moment, I guess. But so after deciding,
that's not a soil moment. Yeah.
I think they're pretty much the same. But after starting, I took over the family farm in December 2016, and obviously coming from, let's say, the technology side, I was deeply interested and fascinated by the whole potential of, let's say, technology and digitalization. And I thought, innovation is key. So basically we're situated 1 hour east of Berlin, and what is very special about the place is the combination of incredibly low precipitation and sandy soil. So as far as the precipitation is concerned, we have a 10-year average of around 450 millimeters, whereas the last 2 years are around 200 to 300 millimeters per year. And then the soil at the same time is very sandy. So we have about between 1.1 and 1.5% organic matter. And that combination obviously is incredibly challenging for growing, for growing anything really. So, yeah, I was thinking of specifying it, but I mean, it comes down to it that, even a cactus needs some water. So basically I came from the technology side and thought, innovation is key, technological innovation is key. And I was in contact with a couple of large agriculture equipment manufacturers saying, let's have an example of a farm, an ecological farm, 1,000 hectares, where we completely bring in all the technology that we have, all the digital processes, and it's 1 hour east of Berlin. We can have this place where people come together, potential buyers, customers, will do events and just show what we actually can do already through technology. And through that process, I was like sitting in my office looking outside and thinking, wow, it's not raining, and it continues to not rain. And I'm reading about satellite and drones and this and here and forth, and I was like, wow, like the reality of what I'll see when I look out of the window versus the theory of technology and instruments that I have on this contract lying before me, it just has nothing to do with each other. The one thing outside with the thing that I'm considering in the office, there is a huge discrepancy between the two when it comes to actual, let's say, applicability.
Practicality.
Practicality, yeah. I mean, exactly. So I stopped all of that and said, okay, this can't be the solution. And I thought, okay, so what is the by far most important asset, and what is like the thing I have to put all my focus on? And then that's exactly where the soil moment really started, because I was like, okay, I mean, this is the key. I mean, soil for us, build soil organic matter, grow healthy soil, build soil fertility. And that being said, I mean, it's the soil biology, the physics, chemistry. I mean, so many things coming together. If I manage to build that, then that is the key for any challenge that there might come. And I mean, there's going to come very many, right?
And then all kinds of technologies and all kinds of ag tech, etc., will be extremely useful if focused on building soil.
Exactly.
Your soil moment, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't want to sound like I don't think technology or digitalization is not going to help us. I think the potential is incredible, but it has to start from the soil. And what I see today in many, many, many cases, especially in agriculture, is that all the technology, all the digital products that we have, they always try to fight a certain problem, but I think what we do in order to restore soil, in order to, find agricultural land use models that actually grow the soil and enhance biodiversity, is not fight the outcomes or fight the problems, but maybe take a step back and think about the root causes of the problems and how we can actually change the root causes of the problems using nature, like in line with nature. And I think that was then, so to say, my moment, first realizing that, the focus has to be soil, and then realizing that, there's very different methods of doing agriculture, of thinking agriculture, of understanding agriculture, and that, being inspired by, all the legends, obviously, that we all know, and the books that we all read, starting from Alan Savory, Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, Ernst Götz from Brazil, Elaine Ingham, understanding what these guys, have been doing for 20, 30 years, which amazing ways of, working with nature can help us in such a,
practical way, yeah.
Amazing way.
And not taking away from, I think, the potential of technology and the potential of machinery and the potential of software and etc. But the goals of the system have to be right. In this case, does it help farmers build soil at scale, or does it enable farmers to do it faster, or does it enable someone like you to actually make other choices and other choices that you otherwise wouldn't have made? Is technology actually enabling you to do more?
Exactly. I mean, I think today, as of now, we all there's on the one side, there's people who are pushing obviously the developments of technology in, let's say, in a way that, we see agriculture being done on a huge scale at the moment. And then on the other side, if there is sides, but then there's this area, this other group that is, focused on, let's say, nature-based solutions, multifunctional land use models, regenerative farming methods. And I think the combination of the two, which is already here and there on a small level, maybe already happening. But I think once we bring those two groups together, or those two lines of thought, I think this is when agriculture will be just fascinating and incredibly, let's say, helping that whole rewarding, not only for the farmer but also on a, let's say, on a wider scale. Because if you ask me, farming, in my belief, is by far the biggest instrument that we have for many of the big problems that we see today. And I mean, we are talking about obviously CO2 sequestration, but we're also talking about health. I mean, that is one of the main parts, food as medicine. We're talking about inequality. We're talking about rural development. We're talking about education. I mean, and this is, I think, all this is all so strongly connected to the question of how we treat nature, how we use nature in a way that we can actually enhance it and make it better. And having that regenerative idea of land use, I think, it's something that we've already seen picking up so much in just the last couple of years. But I think it's going to be the main thing that we'll be talking about, and not only in the agricultural space, but I think it will actually leapfrog into other industries, which we can already see. And I think that is incredible, because, that kind of concept coming out of agriculture into other industries is the way it should be, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it will be fascinating in this series, because this is not the last time we'll be discussing. We're definitely going to focus on transition finance and obviously on the farm you took over, and we're going to discuss that a bit later. But it touches upon so many other things. It touches on ecosystem services, on land ownership, on healthcare, on CO2, on water. I mean, and we're not going to shy away from that. So I'm very excited to really dive deep into this case and to really see where we can get with these models. I want to ask you a bit on the vision of the farm, but actually beyond the farm, because you look beyond things. So you founded the Gut and Bösel. Can you explain a bit what that is and what your beyond farming vision entails?
For sure. Basically, so the idea is, because we are situated 1 hour east of Berlin, we obviously have quite a good connectivity for people that, who are interested in those kind of questions that we work on. And as I said, I believe that the role of us as farmers is far beyond what we today think of. It's not only primary production. It is, and it can be, so many more fascinating things. So we framed a name, so to say, for that concept, which we call Beyond Farming, which really consists of 3 different parts. It's beyond sustainability, which is, of course, the whole idea of saying, well, we don't want to just sustain, we want to make it better. So we're looking for different forms of multifunctional land use models, and bring them here on our challenging environment with the low precipitation and the sandy soil, test them here, develop them here, and see how they can be done in a way that they are socially, ecologically, and economically, let's say, beneficial. So that is one part, bring in those different, lines of thought, I guess, from regenerative agriculture, just to show, what is possible and what not.
On a large scale, like a large commercial farm, I think that's often forgotten, because often this research is done either in universities or other places that maybe don't have to focus on profitability, or need to have it because they have people to pay, or you have people to pay. So there's this interesting, the farm as a platform, or the land as a platform, but within certain boundaries and within the normal, let's say, farming, between brackets, normal farming system.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think, in order to really be part of a paradigm that is being changed or to work into that, we can only make sure that it is applicable if we can scale it and if it is economically feasible, right? So you can think about ecological and social benefits all you want. You need to find, obviously, a way that you can, as a farmer, earn a good income from it and be sustainable from an economic point of view. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, you have to bring it into the real context of being included or, even like a big part of running the farm or being, the farm business. So, yeah, we'll try to scale it up. At the same time, obviously, there's, so much knowledge to be captured, so much, let's say, learnings to be made that, a way for us is also to have people come in that either are skilled in that area already or that, let's say, do a monitoring of it, be it NGOs, be it scientific groups, be it universities, to make sure that you can actually capture all the experience and the learnings that you see. And I mean, there's just so many, right?
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted your beyond, the 3 points of beyond. We were still at beyond sustainability.
I was going to come back to that, but thank you for that. No, so that's really, that's the whole beyond sustainability part. Then on another note, we always say beyond food, because I think to bring in, let's say, the public, to bring in also politicians, to bring in many people who are often, talking about agriculture, let's say, without really being aware of it in that instance, or who talk about food but don't think about agriculture. I think it's always important to find a good, like, you have to speak their language, right? And coming too much, let's say, from the agriculture angle, I think many are not yet there to understand that link between the two. So when we have guests, when we have visitors, when we are somewhere invited to talk somewhere, then we always come from, let's say, the food angle. And so, start the conversation on food and then move them into agriculture and try to, establish a feeling of why the two are so strongly interconnected, why soil health has to do with plant health, human health, animal health. And I think it's a good way of starting a conversation and making people interested about, agriculture as such, because it is so strongly linked to emotions that you always have to, find a way how they can open themselves up for something that...
and start a discussion without
exactly
polarizing it immediately. And
exactly.
Because you lose people very quickly, or farmers in general. I mean, you lose people in general very quickly in these topics, especially on animal agriculture, especially on GMOs, especially on the big chemical companies. I mean, they're rightfully so, very touchy subjects.
Yeah, absolutely.
But food is something we all do. So it's a great way, a great segue into, not starting to talk about soil immediately, which we usually do. But maybe it's not the best way, is maybe to talk about food and how that came from soil and the importance and the challenges and the opportunities.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, when we have visitors or friends even here, one of the first things I always say is that I want them to be as honest and open as they possibly can, because I tell them what I think and I tell them, all my thoughts and ideas and feelings and whatnot. And, if you have people visiting and them not being open, not asking questions, even if they think, it might be a question that I don't want to hear, you will never touch that, those points, those emotions that you actually need to touch upon if you want to get into a real discussion, and if you even might want to change something either in yourself or in the one you're talking to. So, and I think food is something where, you can find that level quite easily and then move on to more complicated matters. So that's that part. And the third is basically what we call beyond business or beyond farm business, really, because being, let's say, an actor in the rural area and obviously having, let's say, the land that you're managing, the forest that you're managing, a lot of infrastructure that goes with it, it's also there. It's not only primary production. Like we always understand ourselves also as a platform. So we we work together with different startups that we, assign certain fields from, or we use their technology or use their product. So we try to bring in some value for them. At the same time, basically, we lease land to a couple that is starting a market garden now. And then the land that we're leasing is for us actually not too good to cultivate, but for them, it's everything, right? So there's huge potential in that. And also there's some synergies. But it goes beyond that. It goes through basically educating people, right? I mean, you could invite schools, you can invite other kids to say, look, just use the land for educating, use the land for all kinds of things, and it either goes beyond that. Thinking about art, thinking about different alternative models of
Tell me about the gigantic root system that you had arrive on your farm as part of an art project.
Yeah, I'll upload a photo of that. But basically, so we have this, basically the area where we live here and where we farm is pretty much where the war ended. So all the old oak trees, I mean, they have seen it all in a way. And next year in spring, we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the ending of the war. And
for the internationalism, the Second World War we're talking about.
Exactly. And we met this artist who's always been, involved in history, German history, and also working with wood. And I said, man, what do you think about doing something together? I would love to do some sort of art project. And so we thought about that idea and went back and forth. And he said, don't you have an old root of an oak? And I was like, yeah, of course, we have plenty of those. So we found this huge oak root, which is, 5-6 meters wide, and the tree is estimated to be around 200 years old. So basically, we took it out of the earth and carried it on the estate, and now it's there to dry. And next year we're hoping to be able to put it in front of or on the stairs of the Reichstag in Berlin, and the art curatorium of the Bundestag will discuss it and think about it in January, I think. So
which is the Parliament building of Berlin, right? Yeah, that would be
exactly
a nice symbol. Yeah, getting the roots of it. I've seen it. We'll put a picture. It's absolutely massive, and as it should be, it's a 200-plus-year-old tree. But still, it's very impressive to see the full or a big part of the root system above ground and not in the soil.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I think also, the root is something that many people often don't think about. And if you see that structure, it's just fascinating. It's really, changing your look on things. And I think that is really something that we have to do on such a great scale. And that is, I think, why art takes or has to have such a huge part of that whole discussion we have today about, changing the way we think about ecosystems, changing the way we think about certain, let's say, economic processes, the setup of companies. That is all somehow involved with the horizon, at least of the, yeah.
I think in terms of art and education, there's an enormous role to make things visible, like the root system, to make Regen Ag visible, to make the damages of the current ag system visible, to make the potential and the imagination. I think there's a huge role for that, and something with like the aesthetics of things and the taste of things, I think, are very closely connected and make all of these discussions just a lot easier. And a lot more fascinating, honestly. And I want to shift gears to, we're going to be extremely practical. We're going to unpack a bit the farm. And we already mentioned a few things, but I want to start with a question, actually. Why are you spending your time on a Friday afternoon to start on what could be quite an extensive journey to explore transition finance, not only for your farm, but actually the principles of transition finance for many other farmers, let's say in Europe, but also actually outside Europe? What made you choose to take on, next to all the farming, the root systems we discussed before, to take on another project?
That's a good question, and one that I've heard before, I guess. But when it comes to this podcast and the whole question of transitioning finance, I think, there's so many young people, there's so many progressive thinkers, there's so many progressive farmers that are, realizing the situation that they're in. Obviously, there's some that are fighting to somehow stay alive, not only the farm, but the families, the work, the passion that they have, the love that they have for farming. And I think those are confronted with incredible problems and incredible, let's say, tasks ahead. So there's that whole group of people who are pretty much forced to find a new way. I mean, they are running out of options. And I think for them, transition financing in a way that still gives them enough flexibility, that gives them enough freedom, that gives them the chance, also, let's say, from a psychological point, really, time to adapt, time to think about new ways, time to widen the horizon. I think that is, a huge area for people who are passionate about agriculture. Yeah. Exactly. And they really need it. So that's one part. And I think another part is of people saying and realizing, wow, there is this whole new paradigm of agriculture, a new paradigm of coping with agricultural land, of cultivating land. There's a whole new meaningfulness of doing agriculture. And I want to get involved. I have me and my friends, want to get involved. How do we do that? How can we get into that? How can we start? How can we, get going? So for those people and those potential also new farmers, I think they are exactly at that point where they say, well, how can I actually start? Because not having the land, not being in that industry already, it's close to impossible to get going. And then there's a third group, which I guess I kind of consider myself part of, that is, already farming, maybe also faced with a couple of potential difficulties, but also incredibly interested to develop further, to go new ways, and at the same time seeing the incredible potential of it, but at the same time having a certain responsibility towards employees, towards family, towards maybe oneself, but also obviously towards the land. And I think that group is also saying, well, we've read all the books. We know, let's say, the characteristics. We see the potential. We want to do it. We believe we can, hit a market. Yeah, we've done the pilots. We're ready to go. But, obviously there's incredible risks involved. So I guess there's three different kind of groups. There's probably many more, but like for me, there's like those large groups, which are all, capable and willing to move into that. And just because, there's so many people considering it, but all of which have to kind of go in unused waters. How do you say it? Untapped waters.
In unknown waters. Yeah.
Exactly.
But still, it comes back to, it still doesn't mean you have to do this. So I want to definitely thank you for your time and that we're going to explore. It's time to talk a bit about the farm and to see, we prepared a nice document with an overview, which we'll definitely link in the description below or wherever you're listening to this podcast so you can read this back. But we can do a few highlights of the farm just to have an idea of size. What are we talking about? And I think you already guessed that it's not a small one. It's definitely bigger than your average few hectares. So Benedikt, can you give a short overview of Gut and Bösel in terms of the farm, but also the bigger platform as you described it?
Yeah, sure. Basically, we are a family farm. So both of my parents live here. My two older sisters live here with their kids. Obviously, I live here. And what we're doing as a whole group, I guess, is basically ecological agriculture on roughly 1,000 hectares, forestry on another 2,000 hectares. There is a bed and breakfast with a couple of double rooms. We have a small bakery that we use, or that we can use. There is an old English garden that we look after, as well as, let's say, different farm infrastructure, that some of which you can use as an event room. And we pretty much run all of that with, let's say, a total of 20 employees. I guess as far as the agricultural land is concerned, as I said, our average ground points is around 35, which I think is a very German thing to say. I'm not sure if it's actually internationally known, but just to give you an idea. So it's a classification of soil quality, whereas 100 is, as good as it gets, and 0 being the lowest. If you're so you're definitely in the lower region. Yeah, I think for Brandenburg, like the county that we're in, it's actually not that bad. There's some that are worse. But to give you an example, if you're if you stand on the beach and you have the sand on your feet, then that's probably 16, 17, 18 ground points, and we are 35. So should give you good estimate of the quality. So our average plot sizes are around 40 hectares, and most of the fields are nicely situated around the farm, I guess. So on a production note, we basically, our focus is grain production. Well, our focus as of now is grain production. Between 70-75% is actually in grain production. Usually we have spelt, barley, rye, wheat, all the classic ones. The rest is really legumes like sweet lupine and alfalfa. And I mean, this is basically the farm structure when I started over. What we have done since then and started with and experimenting with is basically different forms of regenerative agriculture. First of all, let's say a classical agroforestry system where we planted different species of poplar and widow on a large field of roughly 30 hectares. And those are basically just thin lines, double rows, evenly dispersed over the field, really to see the effect on actually the grain production. So we know from the science that even if I reduce the agricultural land by, let's say, 5 to 10% by introducing those tree lines, I could probably have the same yield on the remaining, the same or even higher yield on the remaining agriculture field, just because of the introduction of the ecosystem functions of the biomass of the tree lines. And I think that is so applicable to the place that we are. I mean, we have this incredible drought time between really early spring, early summer. Also afterwards, the ground temperature sometimes reaches, I guess, 70-80%. You have this amazing radiation, heat, dryness. So
anything that can block that basically will exactly help changing the microclimate.
Exactly. So I think, that changing microclimate between the tree lines, I think is going to have a huge impact also on an erosion. Right? Wind erosion is going to be a big thing. And then, I mean, if there is water, if it rains, obviously the soil is in a way that it actually can't take up any of it, right? So I think that let's say simple agroforestry system is going to be very interested. We have a couple of scientific facilities that are also, monetizing the soil development, let's say, or monitoring the soil development, which I think is going to be
monetizing would be great.
Yeah,
that's the next step.
I was going to say, damn.
Wow, you're advanced. Wow, yeah. It's automatic. It's transferring the Bitcoin straight to you. Yeah,
yeah. We'll see how that goes. Depending on the outcome, maybe I'll think about it. But yeah. Then we have a project together with Ernst Götsch, which is from Switzerland, and he developed in Switzerland as well as in Brazil basically a style of agroforestry, a biodynamic agroforestry, I would call it. It's called syntropic agriculture,
which is extremely advanced, right? And I think you're one of the first, or maybe even the first, to do, first of all, at scale. This is 3.5 hectares in Germany. I don't think I've seen anybody getting, first of all, Ernst Götsch to Germany and then actually implementing one of these projects. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it took some motivation, I guess, to bring him over. But I mean, his way of doing agriculture is quite popular in Brazil, in Argentina, and also on a large scale. So it is being proven in a way there already. And he started a couple of projects in Europe, one in Spain, one in Switzerland, one in Portugal, and a few others. And then we are lucky to have him in Germany as well. And the idea is really, and I think actually this is something so fascinating about all those different lines of thought of regenerative ag. It's always, the same characteristics, really. I mean, it's always about keeping the soil covered, having a diverse crop rotation, have a large diversity of plants and animals, all the large ones, less soil disturbance, obviously. And it's the same with the syntropic one. And whenever I have visitors, then everyone is always like, yeah, but how can syntropic agriculture work in your environment? And I always say, well, we're not going to plant any cocoa trees or
bananas.
Or bananas, exactly. But the principles are similar, right? And obviously we're testing and developing. We'll never be ready, but as from what we already can see today, I mean, there's just, incredible potential to it. So what we're doing there is basically having an agroforestry system where we're not only looking obviously at popular, but we're looking at a combination of pioneering species with nut trees, a pioneering species with different fruit trees, fruit bushes, having different layers within one tree line, and obviously different potential usages at different times, all having some sort of synergetic effect with each other and helping each other on different level, be it through fungi, be it through shadows, be it through different root structures. So very versatile, very complex. And those systems are always designed in a way that part of the system is actually for the system itself. Basically, the pioneer species will be pruned each year, and the biomass that is, being cut is then brought back onto the soil to, stimulate, let's say, nutrients for and food for the soil microbiology and biology, obviously. And another part of the system is for producing nutritious food for people, or actually animals also. So that is a system that we're trying, and we've just planted, I think, 1,500 trees and bushes a couple of weeks, or actually 2 weeks ago. So and then the next project is basically
the animals. Yeah, you were mentioning them already.
Yeah, holistic grazing, following Alan Savory. At least we're trying to, but it's really tough when it comes to having your mobile fence and having no rain for 8 weeks. Then I haven't yet found a mobile fence that is hard enough or good enough to get into the ground. So much to be learned. But anyway, so
maybe some people that are listening that are operating in more desert-like circumstances have some tips for you.
Yeah, basically, I know there's we need that rolling kind of fence that is on, I think, 5 different poles, and it rolls above the ground. I think that is a good way of doing it, because our soil gets as hard as stone pretty much. If it doesn't rain for a while, then there's just nothing you can put in there as of a fence. But basically, we have pretty much 20 cows. We'll have our first calves. Had our first calves a couple of weeks ago. We'll have another 20 heifers coming beginning of next year's, and another or part of our herd is gonna have their cows also beginning next year. So we'll have around 60 heads starting the year, and obviously practicing, let's say, rotational grazing and learning and observing as much as we can. One thing that we'll be starting to build within the next couple of weeks is our first mobile laying hen house, as well as 3 little groups for the broilers. And the broilers will go into the syntropic testing grounds, and the laying hens will then start to follow the cows in spring next year.
And as you have so much grain, you for sure also have some leftovers to feed them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is really one of the concepts that are easy to grasp. Basically, use potential side-offs or things that you don't actually have usage for, and see how you can somehow create some value from it. And as far as the grain is concerned, I mean, we have a cleaning facility for the grain, so there's so much leftover, so much potential garbage grain, so to say. That is a great feed potentially. So we'll definitely use that, and the same way with potential compost components. We've started doing some different experiments with composting. So the classical vermicompost. We've built 4 bioreactors following the Johnson-Su model, which we're really, let's say, fascinated and also excited about, to get that microbiology and the bacteria and the fungi going. So it's a good project. I'll show. I could provide some photos of that later on as well.
They look very very impressive, I have to say. And you were mentioning that they actually get to some good temperatures, but obviously we have to see over the next months how that develops. And when you think, I want to spend a few minutes. I want to be conscious of our time as well, to spend a few minutes on when I say transition finance, or when somebody mentions that in this context of this farm, what does that trigger to you? What would you be able to do if you had appropriate transition finance? And what would that mean in terms of these projects that you just mentioned, and the pilots, some are maybe out of pilot phase, some are definitely in the pilot phase. What would you do with transition finance?
That's a good question.
Which we're going to explore in the next episode. So like the first few thoughts, what comes to mind now on this Friday afternoon?
Exactly. I mean, what comes to mind? First of all, I think there's a couple of learnings that one needs to have done or needs to be in order to know the way and the how, which is applicable to the one in question. I think that's something that we are really figuring out right now, and we already have quite a good idea of what I understand, or what I would like to understand, I guess. When I hear transitioning finance, it's basically a partner, a way of having a partner that, in the best case, understands the situation that I am in, that we're in, understands why we want to change, how we can change, why it is profitable to go that way. And by saying profitable, I don't only talk about, monetization for me as a farmer or us as a farm operation, but obviously talk about, the ecological side of it, the social potential, and let's say, the industry as a whole. And, and on top of that, having that idea of, changing fundamental habits and changing a horizon, and that in a way that gives you the leeway to actually rethink certain ways and processes and also have the time. I think I always
time
call
is an
it
interesting one.
At the time, I to be honest with you, I always call it like emotional freedom. That's what it is for me, because we are faced with so many pressures and fears and risks. And risks. Yeah, it's sometimes as beautiful and inspiring and great it is to be a farmer and to be outside and to do all of those things. It is a huge pressure that you have. It's a huge responsibility you have. It's not only, the family and the family of the people who are working on the farm. It goes beyond that. And I think in order to be able to change and to facilitate change, you can't work freely if you have that pressure on you all the time, and if you have those fears about the future all the time. So for me, that idea of transitioning is also to have, the feeling that you're not alone in this game, and there's someone or an institute that is being part of it, that understands it, that goes through the highs as well as the lows, and that you can rely on. But obviously that goes both ways, So.
And what, in this case, you mentioned a number of pilot projects, and obviously we'll dive deeper into the different ones, and we'll dive deeper with guests into all the aspects of transition finance. And obviously that's going to change over years as new things, a lot of lessons will be learned. Would it now be is it safe to say that most of let's say, if you got transition finance, whatever shape or form that will take, now it would be, you would use it to speed up the implementation of some of these, because some are 30 hectares, some are 3.5, but it's very expensive to do cover crops everywhere, and it's very expensive to plant trees, and very risky because not everything has been figured out yet. So you are looking for basically fuel to speed up the process, and at the same time buy time. Like, it's this constant tension between speeding up and actually going slower and take a step back and actually have that emotional freedom, which you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. That is completely right. I think when it comes to, the level, on the ground level of the different projects, I would have a pretty good idea of where to start if I was going to speed up, or if I wanted to speed up, right?
And what kind of sizes are we thinking of? Are we discussing 5,000, 500,000? 5 million or 50 million? What is the dimensions, without going into euro details? What are dimensions people should think about if they're going to also help us and reach out with feedback, with ideas, with people to interview, etc.? That we are talking about this large scale farm, because it is 1,000 hectares plus the forestry part, where we talk about the farming part now. What are the dimensions you are at least thinking of and calculating with, let's say, in your models?
Yeah, basically, I mean, obviously there's different ways of, let's say, the speediness of the process that you want to take and also the scale that you want to consider. But, from what I've experienced so far, from the things that I've seen, and I think I have a good idea also of, let's say, the financial applications, I would probably have a discussion of, let's say, something between 500,000 and 1 million to really take a couple of bigger steps. And I think that's already quite a lot.
It's a lot, and it's nothing if we talk about some movements in the space or movements in the finance space. But yeah, obviously it's an enormous amount of money if you look at your general bank account.
Exactly. And I mean, this is really where suddenly that whole discussion of transition financing on an emotional level makes you feel how important it is. Because if you think that in a usual bank loan, so to say, having that figure just in front of you, that is a lot of money on the farm level, let's say. And I think that it makes it quite tangible why, that whole idea of transition financing is so important, because, you have to think about a way that you can work with that money and actually develop and achieve what you're setting out to or what you're trying to, in a way that, as we've already said, give you the freedom and the time to actually work with it and not having to worry and not having to, think about annuities and the bank that is not going to be on your side of the table, right?
It's not going to be
I think that's exactly. I think that's a critical part, really.
We would love it to be. I mean, if your local bank, talking to all the farmers that hopefully listen, is that partner and has the principles that we're going to explore in this series and is honoring that, then obviously that would be ideal. And if you can find that money somewhere. But what we've seen in many of these discussions, like this finance to transition farms, often isn't there or is very badly or unfairly, let's say, structured. So we're going to explore those questions, and they're going to be uncomfortable questions and they're going to be difficult ones in the next episodes with guests actually on the show. So we're going to have people that are deep into this space and going to ask them to see and look at this case and say, okay, how would you finance this if you were in those shoes? So I'm extremely excited to explore that further over the next months and dive deeper into the transition finance piece and everything that unlocks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I'm kind of looking forward. It's a combination of looking forward and being scared of of the kind of things that we'll have to talk about, the kind of connections that we'll make. I think are going to be incredibly interesting, and it'd be great to hear also from a potential audience that is interested in the space, what kind of questions they have and what kind of problems they see or fears that they have, because I think as far as farming is concerned, it's so heterogeneous, and the things and the questions that I ask, the problems that I have, the considerations that I think about are obviously all my problems, and this is supposedly really not about me. It's just an idea of of starting a conversation or let's say on a farmer's level. So I mean, it would be great to hear some other.
Get in touch. Yeah. Get in touch either through SoundCloud, Twitter, or the website investinginregenerativeagriculture.com, and then you can go to the contact page and you get straight to us. So we're very much looking forward to hear from you, and let's get started with this journey.
Perfect. Koen, thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode, which is part of the Transition Finance series, trying to find appropriate transition finance to speed up regenerative agriculture on farms. For feedback, ideas, suggestions, please contact us through Twitter or via the contact page on the website, investinginregenerativeagriculture.com. Please share this episode with a friend and give us a 5-star rating, which really helps others to find the podcast. All the episodes of the series can be found on the website and in your podcast app. Thank you and see you next time. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. how to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? And what questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space. For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, ag tech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're gonna look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.